Hello everybody, welcome. Great to see you all here for this presentation about what I'm calling people-powered AI. So there are a lot of people who talk about the technology behind AI, and of course it's really important, but the more important thing is bringing people on the AI journey. So we've got an hour working together, and I want to make this an interactive presentation. So if you're watching the recording, fine, hello, welcome to you. I hope you'll still get value from this, but if you're here live, I'm sure you'll get you will get the chance to engage and interact and look at this topic a little bit more deeply. So my three standard rules of engagement for all my presentations, people who've seen me before will know this. The first one is I want to give you some things to think about. So, and can I invite you to think a bit bigger than you normally would in your everyday operational role, because it'll be, you'll get more value from doing it that way than to think small and then try and think bigger when life gets in the way. The second thing is I really want to make this interactive, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to engage. So, and can I ask you to be playful here? We'll do a couple of interactive things as we go, and the more you engage, the more value you'll get from it, and the more value other people in the room will get from it as well. And the third thing is I really want to give you some things to take away and put into action, because AI is a big topic now and sometimes it's overwhelming to know how to get started. And towards the end of this presentation, I will talk about some specific things that you can do to get started on that AI journey. And along the way, there'll be some practical ideas that I'll give you that you can take away as well. So first, AI has been around for a long time. It's of course become really big since the launch of ChatGPT in late 2022, but it has been around for a long time before that. In fact, even when I was studying at the University of Western Australia more than 30 years ago, I was studying computer science, and my computer science thesis was in AI. So I've kind of been tracking and following AI since the 1900s, and for the last 10 or so years, I've been helping a lot of my clients implement and start using AI in their organizations. Now, in the last 18 months, everybody wants to know about it. So let's have a look at what that means for us, especially from a people point of view. Okay, I want to do a couple of little interactive things just before we get started here. So there are a couple of things that you can do here. So feel free to turn on your video if you want to. It's not essential, and most of the time we'll be using the chat room. But if you want to turn on your video, I can see a smiley face there. That's great, but don't feel that you need to do that. The second thing is, the other thing that you can do is use emojis. So if you use the emoji buttons on your on Zoom, then actually let's do that now. Let me ask you a question. How do you feel at the moment about AI? Okay, and use your, rather than typing in the chat, use your emojis so we can, so everybody can see. Okay, so lots of thumbs up. That's nice to see. Okay, some applause. Okay, some people are a little bit okay, some hearts. Great to see so many positive reactions to AI. And it's okay if you're not positive about it yet. Even if you're not sure, that's okay, because it's really important that you get a better understanding of it rather than rushing ahead thinking that you know everything about it. So if you're unsure, that's okay. That's a good place to be at the moment. All right, so the four things that I want to cover broadly today, I want to give you very briefly, so why should we be interested in this? And I think you know why already, but I'll show you some of the latest things that are happening in AI and how rapidly it's moving. And the next thing is the specific applications that you can use AI for. And I'm going to break them into two broad categories, which will help you understand when you're working with your teams, which areas they'll get the most value from. And the third area is, of course, the who, so this is about your team. And the last one is how to, as I said, some really practical action steps that you can put into place. All right, so let's get into this. So let's look at some of the why first. And I basically want to show you briefly some of the latest things that are happening in AI. I won't spend a lot of time on this because, of course, we want to talk about you and your role as a leader and your team and organization. But let me show you a few interesting things that have happened just in the last month or so, in the last few weeks. So this is one that you might have seen. So NVIDIA, which is a chip making company and AI company, they've just released this software that allows you to have AI powered nurses, and healthcare organizations can hire them out for $9 an hour. And these are not robot nurses. These are people using through a tablet or an iPad, where you interact with a nurse avatar, and that nurse is giving non-diagnostic advice. So it's not the specialized work that the specialized expertise that a nurse has, but some of the more routine lower level work is now possibly done by AI, so that human nurses can do the things that they're really able to do, and that's their real expertise. So this is happening in nursing. It's going to happen in a lot of other industries and sectors as well. The next one is Perplexity. So if you're not familiar with Perplexity, Perplexity.ai is another chatbot similar to ChatGPT. It's kind of a competitor to ChatGPT, and I'm not saying that here just to recommend it, although I do recommend it because it's a little bit better in some of the research. If you've got research-oriented tasks, Perplexity is better. But I don't want to go into that now. I want to say that Perplexity has also published a podcast. It's called Discover Daily. It's a little 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minute podcast around science and tech, and is one of the top 200 podcasts in the world today. The interesting thing about this is that this podcast is 100% generated by AI. So the Perplexity AI does the research every day, puts the script together. It has the voice is voiced by another AI company called 11 Labs, and it's completely AI generated. So even if you're not interested in science and tech, I think it's worth subscribing to this Discover Daily podcast, a free podcast, and just get an idea of the quality of AI at the moment. And if you listen to the podcast, it's in a British accent, and but it sounds like a human. And at times you can detect that it's not a human because it gets the emphasis wrong sometimes. So things like that, some of the phrasing isn't quite 100% correct, but it's pretty good and is getting better as we go. Okay, third example I want to share with you. This is OpenAI, the company that created ChatGPT. They've got a new product called Sora, and it's not released to the public yet, but they've done some demos and they've released it to a small group of people just to play around with it. Let me explain what it does. So when ChatGPT was first launched, if you remember, it was all about text. You type in some text and it gives you text in return. Last year, it became more sophisticated, so you could type in text to generate images like this. You could type in this really complex description of an image, and you can see here, stylish woman walks down a Tokyo street, and it talks about her attitude, what's around her, what's happened. So the street's damp because it's just been raining, and it could create, and ChatGPT now, if you've got the paid version, will create an image like this. This is what I created when I typed in that prompt to ChatGPT and asked it to create an image. Sora takes this to the next level. So now you can, with Sora, or when it becomes released to the public, you can give it a prompt like this, and it not only not creates an image, it creates a video. So from that same prompt, you'll get this. Okay, so this is not CGI. This is artificial intelligence working from a text prompt and creating a video. I don't think we're too far away from having a completely 100% AI generated movie. So this is what's happening right now, and I can see people in the chat already saying amazing, and this is the future, and absolutely is. So this is some of the thing that's going to happen. This is already happening. So Anne says, love it. Yeah, look, so this is happening now. So the technology is available. It hasn't been released to us yet, but the technology is absolutely available right now. And thank you for people doing emojis. That's also one thing, that if you want to share emojis anytime during this time we've got together, please do so. One other quick little example about how AI is changing the world. So there was this report that came out about a month ago in India that the Indian government wanted to start regulating AI. So any tech companies in India that want to create any AI had to send it to the government first for approval before it could be released. The interesting thing about this story is that 2 weeks later, they had to backtrack because they got such a backlash from Indian businesses and Indian entrepreneurs. And this is a big news story. And you might wonder why we're looking at India. India is the world's biggest country. It's the world's biggest democracy. It's got 1.4 billion people, and having that size of population means that it can do a lot of things in a way that we Westerners just aren't used to. It's a different kind of business, lots of different kinds of business models. For example, this woman here, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, is an Indian billionaire healthcare entrepreneur. So she works in healthcare, and she says that for her, creating a blockbuster drug is about serving 1 billion people, not about $1 billion company, which is so different from the way that Western companies think. So we think if we can create $1 billion company, fantastic. And of course, it's all about serving patients, but there aren't many countries in the world that have access to 1 billion patients. And AI is allowing many parts of the world to be able to leapfrog the way that we've done business in the past and create new business models and new ways of solving problems. I could spend a whole presentation talking about disruptive business models, and I won't, but I just want to give you that one example just to give you an idea of what's happening around the world where AI is going to have an impact even on us. Okay, so as we go through today, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of self-assessment. So I've got 10 yes-no questions for you. And I'd like you just to answer, roughly just for yourself, a yes-no to these 10 questions. Let me give you some broad ones first, and then as we keep going, we'll get to the more specific ones as well. So this is just for yourself. Don't share in the chat. Just give yourself a score, 0 or 1, yes or no, for each of them. So at the end, you'll get a score out of 10. Okay, so the first one here is, as a team or organization, have you explored what AI can do for productivity and like cost savings and actually creating revenue as well? So just give yourself a rating, 0 or 1 in that one, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. And the next one is, have you thought about and identified ways that you can use AI to enhance your customers' experiences? In other words, solve their problems, help them achieve their goals and their overall interaction with you. The next one is identified risks and challenges of using AI, really important. So that goes into a lot of AI policies. And the next one is the risks and challenges of not using AI. So I find many people have done the first one, but they haven't looked at the cost of inaction, which is what this one's about. And question 5 is that if you started implementing AI, do you have an ongoing plan to monitor it and just assess its effectiveness? Okay, so give yourself a score, 0 or 1 in each of those areas. So at the end of this, you'll have a score out of 5. I won't ask you to share that now. The other 5 questions will come a little bit further when we talk about the more specific things around people. Okay, so let's talk about this second area here. By the way, I'm going to stop at various points and ask if you've got questions. If you've got questions, type them in the chat, and I'll answer as many questions as we can in the time that we've got here. So when we finish this what section, I'll stop for questions. Okay, the what question is really, what can AI do for you? And I'm going to share with you some work that was done in this book called Work Without Jobs. And Ravin Jayasathasan talks about the future of work. And whenever I talk to leaders about the future of work, I share this framework with them. This is a great book to read. It's not saying that we won't have jobs in the future. That's kind of a sexy title that sells books. But it's talking about what work will look like in the future when we don't have the sort of standard jobs that we've been used to. And COVID's kind of shaken things up a little bit, and we already know that the way we work is a bit different from the way it used to be pre-COVID. But here's the overall framework. Here's a 2-minute summary of the book. In the future, when you're thinking about work, the first thing to think about is to identify the outcomes. What do we need the work to achieve? The next step is, how do we combine humans and machines to do the work? So if we're talking about physical work, it'll be humans and robots. If we're talking about knowledge work, it'll be humans and AI. The next step is to think about how employment works. And already we know that COVID has changed, whether you have full-time, part-time, working from home, 100%, hybrid work, whether you have the 4-day work week, people working from Bali and other parts of the world. So that's going to become even more important in the future because we're going to be more connected and employees will want different options. And the last one is for you as a leader, for HR and an organization, how do you attract the right talent to get the work done? So it's how do you recruit, and also how do you bring people in, not on a full-time basis. Obviously today we're talking about this second one here. We're talking about how humans and AI are going to work together. In fact, we're going to talk about the first and the second. So what's the work that AI can do and that the AI can help us do? And then we'll talk about the who, which is the how do we get our team along on this AI journey. Okay, so what sort of work can AI do? So if you think about the time that you've got in your week, consider how you spend that time. And I reckon broadly, there are two things that you do with that time. So the first thing is that you spend your time doing your core work. This is what you're being paid to do. In fact, this is, if you think about it broadly, this is what you do to solve your customers' problems and or help them achieve their goals. Now, you may not be completely customer facing, but ultimately this is the work that you do that contributes towards that. And you'd like that to be 100% of your work week. But we all know that that's not the case. Okay, so in addition to the core work that you do, there's everything else that gets in the way of you doing your core work. It may be work that you have to do, but it's not directly related to your core work. So can I ask you in the chat to just type in the sort of things that you might think of as everything else? So what are the things that are not your core work, but you still have to do? We're not talking about wasting time. These are things that you have to do, but they're not necessarily what you'd consider your core work. Okay, I'm going to share a couple of them here. Meetings, admin, yep, emails, managing staff. Okay, so these are essential things, right? But they're not necessarily your core work. Graham, doing your BAS. Yep, preview other people's documents. Yep. Admin. Yeah, okay, tech problems. Yeah, so Diane says request to present at conferences. And yep, good, okay. Staff well-being. So you can see here, some of these things are really important, but they're not necessarily what you think of as core work. Okay, so these are the things that AI can help us with. AI can help us in both the areas. So thank you everyone for doing that. Appreciate that. And AI can help us in both of those areas. The first thing that it can do, and I reckon these are probably the quickest wins that you get from AI, is if you can use AI, and people in your team can use AI to take away a little bit of that burden of the non-essential work or non-core work so that you can spend more time applying your human intelligence to that core work. The second thing that AI can do is absolutely it can assist you with some of that core work as well. It doesn't replace you, but it can assist you. So always think about AI as an assistant, not an expert. So when you're thinking about people-powered AI and bringing your team along on the journey, think about these two categories. I'll give you a few examples here just to get you thinking about core work and non-core work. And the line between them, the reason it's a dotted line here, is not exact. So this is not an exact science, and there'll be things that people will say in these examples that I've identified as core work, and you said that's actually non-essential, and vice versa. Okay, so don't get too caught up in this, but broadly, when you start implementing it, when you start talking to your team about bringing them along on the AI journey, ask them, what's the core work and what's the other work that we can maybe free you up by using AI for? Let me give you a few examples. This is a company, organization I worked with recently, the Golf Management Australia. So this is the association for golf managers, managers of golf clubs all around the country. And I was just showing them some very simple things that they could do with AI. So one of the core jobs that a manager of a golf club has is sending out a newsletter to all her or his members. So that's part of their core work, and AI showed how AI could help them draft a newsletter, which then they could refine and fine-tune. Some of the non-core work, and some people may say this is core, is responding to complaints from members by email. Okay, so that's something that, again, some people will say that's core and that's something you should do. But again, it's responding to emails. Working with travel agencies, so I work with a travel group. Part of their core work now is creating travel itineraries for clients, because you can absolutely use AI to create your own itinerary, but it's not great. Okay, it's not great. But travel agents can definitely use that and then add their human intelligence on top of it. But also some of the other things they do are some of their marketing. So social media might not be their core work, and AI can definitely help in that area. Third area, this is a school I worked with here in Perth recently called Grammar School. So you can imagine for staff in schools, their core work is teaching in the classroom. So AI can absolutely help in creating and crafting lesson plans and then modifying them for the students in the class. Some of the non-core work might be preparing for a what might be a challenging parent-teacher interview, something like that. So again, AI can help and can advise in that area. A fourth example here, I won't give the organization name, but it's an organization that works with the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So they work in disability and mental health. And some of the core work they do is creating support plans for their clients. It's not creating, but it's drafting. Okay? And then they add, so it does 80% of the work, and then the experienced support worker adds a 20% on top of that. But also some of the non-core work might be, for example, when I was working with this organization, they were applying for, they had vacancies and their job listings on their website, and we used AI to craft some job listings. Okay, so those are some examples of the sort of things that AI can do. And I hope those examples give you an idea of what might be core or non-core for your role, and perhaps how AI can help you in those. So let me just stop now and just see if there's any questions around what we've talked about so far. So what AI can help you with. I've got a bit of a poll coming up here as well, which we'll talk about soon. But first of all, let me take some questions. If you've got some questions, type them in the chat. So anything that we've talked about so far, and then I'll do a quick poll based on some research that was done recently by Amazon around what AI is going to be able to do and what leaders think that AI is going to be able to do. Okay, I'm just going to wait a little bit, and there'll be other opportunities to ask questions as well, so you don't need to ask straight away. Okay, so Jose has a question. How do you address the risks of AI that executives ask when introducing this? Yeah, so I think, Jose, I think the question you're asking is that you want to use AI for your team, but people at a higher level are saying, well, there are lots of risks, so we shouldn't use it, right? I think that's the question, and if that's the case, hold on to that question, because I will address that a little bit later on, actually. There's pretty much a specific question. And Jose says, yep, that's a question. Okay, any others? So the quick answer to that, Jose, because I don't want to keep you in suspenders for a long time, is the quick answer to that is that you start with some pilot projects. So do some things that are really constrained, prove that it works, and then get buy-in from above. But the other part of that is increase the knowledge in the team, so that when you're doing it, you understand some of the risks, so that you and team members can exercise good judgment in doing it. Okay, Keith says, I've been trialing Copilot. Yeah, okay, so this is Microsoft Copilot, and says been very disappointed. Yeah, okay, so one of the things I'll say broadly with all of these AI tools, Keith, is that quite often when they're early, it's quite disappointing, but it's growing so quickly and advancing so quickly, so don't give up on it just yet. And coming back to your question specifically, is about Copilot in general. So look, I think that there are four big AI, generative AI tools at the moment. There's ChatGPT, there's Microsoft Copilot, there's Google, what used to be called Bard is now called Gemini, and there's Perplexity, which is the one that I mentioned earlier on. And they're all pretty good, but they're getting better. And also, I reckon that, and I don't know your experience, Keith, but I reckon that you should play around with it, and the more you play around with it, the better you'll get at using it. And also, don't go for 100%, and I'm sure you're not. I'll share with you towards the end some research that Microsoft has done specifically around Copilot about how to get people competent with it. I'll share that towards the end. Alicia, can we be certain that AI facts are correct? No. In fact, you can be certain that AI facts are not correct. Many of them are not correct. So anything that AI generates, you need to double check and triple check before you use it. So absolutely. So use it to create it. Think of it as a reasonably good assistant. But if you've got an assistant who's not where you don't completely trust their competence, you double check and triple check their facts. I'll give you an example later about a couple of organizations that got this really badly wrong. Okay, Chelsea asks a really interesting question here. We're often asked to employ people with low skills or having disabilities, but with AI starting to take over these tasks, this is more challenging. What are other organizations doing to recruit and retain a diverse workforce? So I love this question, Chelsea, because maybe my angle on it's slightly different. AI actually enables diversity, because there, for example, I've worked with schools where teachers have said to me, I've got dyslexic kids in my class, but they can use ChatGPT to get started with writing with an assignment, whereas previously their dyslexia would hold them back from that. The other part of the diversity is, of course, the positive side of diversity. So autistic people actually have a lot of skills and talent that, because they're outside the mainstream, they're given this label, and actually it turns out that they're particularly competent and really effective in using some of these tools. So it's not necessarily a problem. And I know your question was specifically about AI taking over some of those. I think you're talking about what we'd call low-level tasks, but actually there's a real opportunity for, if it's done right, to do the inclusion part of diversity and inclusion, is to bring in the skills and talents and uniqueness of people who otherwise we would label, in the past, have been labeled as disabled. It's a big conversation. It's a big conversation, and it's one that has to be done intentionally. Okay, I'll answer one more here, and then we'll come back to some others. So Diane asked the question, we've noticed an increase in CVs that are obviously created by AI. They're really formulaic and give little information about the personality of the applicant. Your thoughts? Okay, I do have some thoughts about this, Diane, and it might not be the answer that you're expecting. So are you asking the question, I wonder whether your approach to this, and us in the room as a whole, is your approach to this, if somebody has created a CV that's obviously been generated by ChatGPT, is your approach to this person is so lazy they didn't even put enough work into the job application? Or is your approach to this, wow, this person is using the absolute latest technology to help them do something in applying for a job, in doing the work that they want to get done. If you remember the whole idea of work without jobs, figure out the work, which is to get the job, and figure out how you can combine humans and machines, and this person has used AI. So, okay, they need a little bit of fine tuning because they're not doing it perfectly, but isn't this exactly the sort of person that you want on your team? So that's my response to that, Diane, and I reckon those are the sort of people that bring them on board. As quickly as you can. Okay, so not everyone will agree with that. However, again, we'll talk about AI champions a little bit later, and this is a really important part of that as well. All right, let's continue, and I can see some other questions coming in as well, which I'm happy to answer as we go along. Let me show you that there's some research that was done by Amazon recently, where they asked Australian leaders around Australia about the impact of AI in the organizations. Let me show you this poll here. And this one says, what percentage of Australian companies or employers expect their companies to be AI-driven organizations by 2028? So if you can type in the chat A, B, C, or D. Don't put in the numbers because it'll only recognize the letters A, B, C, or D. What percentage of Australian companies expect to be AI-driven organizations in the next less than 5 years? All right, let's see. I'll actually show the results as they're coming up. Okay, so people are going, so I think 50% is winning at the moment, closely followed by 70%. Okay, 70% is catching up. Okay. Good, good, good. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks for doing that. So the correct answer is 90%. So 90% of companies expecting, but according to their leaders, expecting to be AI-driven organizations by 2028. So less than 5 years from now. The first person who got that right, Graham. Great to see you here, Graham. So Graham was the first person with the correct answer. So look, it's interesting, isn't it? And I can see lots of people going, wow, I'm surprised by that. But yeah, we're talking about 90%. 90% of organizations are saying we're going to be AI-driven by 2028. And I really want to make the point here, AI-driven doesn't mean these are organizations that are going to be run by robots and software. AI-driven means that AI is going to be underlying every process, every stage of everything that you do in your customer experience, in your internal processes. AI is a really powerful tool, and organizations who are using it are definitely going to be ahead. And the ones who aren't are definitely going to be falling behind. Okay, so this is actually happening in Australia right now. Let's look at this third area here. So this is bringing people along on the journey. So I've got 2 questions for you here, continuing our little survey of 10 questions. Let me ask this couple here. In fact, for this one, I might even ask you to share a yes or no in the chat. So let me explain the question first. So the question is, and give yourself a rating of yes or no, we've had conversations with people about the impact of AI. So can you just type in the chat, yes or no, that you've already had conversations with your team about the impact of AI? Yes, I see quite a few yeses. Good. Yeah, right. Okay, so it's really good to see. So when I run this with organizations and leaders within internally within organizations, generally the yes number is quite a bit lower, but you can see here like 80% of people have had conversations about AI already with their team members. So let me ask the next question, which is a slightly different question about this particular item. So in those conversations, what sort of questions do you think you should be asking? What sort of topics should you be raising? Can you type in the chat and I'll share a couple of them with on the screen. So what sort of things do you want to talk about in those conversations? Or could you talk about? Yeah, ethical use of AI from Keith. Good. How can improve our work productivity? Great, from Sophie. Fears, yep, really good one, Anne, of course, yep. The other one from Matt, efficiency. Security of their role, absolutely. Some people are very concerned about AI taking over their jobs. Yeah, so Nicole, as you're quite right, so it's like some really specific things as well. Yeah, and I'm glad somebody came up with this one. Thank you, Matt. What development do we need? So what do we need in terms of our professional development to be able to use AI well? Yeah, so what does this and the next iteration make possible? And it's really interesting. I'm going to stop with this one here because it leads on to the next question that I want to ask you. So the thing is, like, asking your team members, what can AI do for us, is just as valuable and I think really important, rather than everything about AI being dictated from the top down. Absolutely, your policy might be shaped from management, but the actual use of AI, everyone's using it now because everyone's got access to this chat GPT and other tools like it. And so they'll have some ideas about how AI can be used. And generally their ideas are quite broad, and it might be up to you and the policy to put some guardrails around it, but make sure that you do ask people how they're planning to use it and what they think it can be used for. Because that leads on to the next one, which is this one here. Have you identified AI champions in your team who can lead the way? Again, I'll ask you please just to type in yes or no. So I would recommend, if you're a leader, that you are not the AI champion for your team, but you might bring other people along. Identify other people, one or two other people who are going to be the AI champions in your team. Again, really impressed. So 70% of people are saying, yes, we've identified AI champions. Okay, excellent. Okay, let me ask you another bit of for another bit of interaction. We'll do this one slightly differently. If I ask you what quality, and this time I'll ask you to do, we'll do it with just one or two words. What quality do you think is most important in an AI champion in your team? Just type in one or two words in the chat, and we'll see what people are saying. Okay, so a lot of people say empathy, innovative, ethical, and I see ethical and ethics both there, creative. You're open-minded, moonshot thinking. Great. It's really interesting. This, every time I run this, I get different responses, and it seems like this time in this group, in the room here, empathy is the one that's come up the most, which is great to see. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking part in that. So, as you can see, like I think these two questions are the most important ones when you're thinking about bringing people along on the AI journey. So, just to reiterate the two questions, the first one is having conversations with everyone in your team about the impact of AI, and as we saw here, positive and negative impact and what that means for them, and going forward, what can you do in a positive way, and also to give them security. And the second part is identifying AI champions in your team. I've got some additional resources for you here in the form of a workbook that'll go along with this presentation. In fact, I'll give that to you now, but I've also, let me show you where I got this from. So I've created a package. It's a product called Better Meetings, and it's a series of activities. There's more than 50 of them now for leaders and managers to use with their team when they're looking at things like disruption, innovation, change. They're not all around AI, but there are some around AI. So I can't give you access to the whole product because this is something that clients buy from me, but I will give you these three worksheets that are there for around AI. There's three modules around AI. Let me show you what they look like. So one is around AI risks, problems, and challenges. And each of these activities, there's a guide for you to run this in your team, but that's okay. You don't need to know all that in detail. You can I'll give you the worksheet that you can download. There's another one about bringing people on the AI journey. And again, there's a worksheet there, which I'm going to give you. And there's one about helping your AI champions. And that's got two parts. So one is how do you identify your AI champions? And the second part is what are some of the obstacles that you and your AI champion might face in your AI journey, and how do you overcome them? So I think you'll find this really valuable for you in your own practice, in your team. If you're thinking about bringing people along on the journey, the whole team and your AI champions, I'll show you how to, these worksheets will show you how to do that. At least it'll get you started. So the workbook here, let me share this in the chat for you so that you can have it. Okay, so you'll see the link there to if you click the link in the chat, you can download it. And if you're watching the recording, I'll make sure the link to that is available to you as well when you're getting access to the recording. Okay, so that's there for you, and you'll find those worksheets in there. This is all my material, so feel free to share it and copy it as well and use it with your team, because this is so important when you're bringing people along on the journey. Okay, I'm going to stop for questions again. We haven't quite finished this area yet, but I'm going to stop for questions, and thank you for the thank yous there. Okay, so if you've got further questions, please ask in the chat and I'll answer them. And we might have one more opportunity for questions near the end. Okay, I'm going to continue. I've got another little poll for you here. This is another poll that was done in Australia and New Zealand. There's a company called Elmo. Elmo is a software company, and they work particularly in the HR space. So they, every year, they do a lot of thought leadership around leaders and HR in particular. And every year they publish this HR industry benchmark report. They've just published this one this year. If you want to read the report, it's available free. You can download it off the Elmo website. And I reckon it's worth following Elmo as well. They're really good when they're talking about leaders, managers, workplaces. So if that's your responsibility, and I assume it is, then that's a really good organization to follow. But I've got a poll for you here, because Elmo, when they looked at biggest challenges that leaders are facing at the moment, one of them, of course, is productivity. So I've got a poll question here. According to the Elmo research, again, it's an A, B, C, or D. What do Australian leaders say is the biggest barrier that's holding back productivity growth in their organization? So is it employee engagement? Is it leadership? Is it prioritization? In other words, just not knowing what to prioritize? Or is it lack of clarity around goals? So A, B, C, or D. I'll show the answers as they're coming in. Okay, so leadership's taking the lead. Clarity is second. Okay, interesting. Okay, so leadership came up as number one. The actual answer was lack of employee engagement. And if you look at if you read the report, I've ordered these in the right order. So lack of employee engagement was number one, leadership was two, prioritization was three, structure and clarity was four. Let's see who got the answer first. Sophie, congratulations, Sophie. Okay, so yeah, so lack of employee engagement was considered the number one biggest problem that's holding back productivity. And there, of course, we know that there are a lot of reasons for lack of employee engagement, and we know employee engagement is a big problem. And I'm not saying AI is the cause of that or the solution to it, but it's definitely one of the causes. And we saw earlier people say, in the room, we identified that one of the problems with AI is that people are afraid of it. They have real fears about it, and even fears about their livelihood, not just doing something wrong when using it. So let's look at these next steps. Let me just quickly go see if there are other questions. There was a comment earlier. Oh, no, that's not a relevant one for now. Okay, so let's look at some of the specific things. And we've covered, I think, 7 out of our 10 questions. So let's do the last 3 here. So the first one here, give yourself a private rating. I won't ask you to share this time. If you've got an AI policy, or if you've got no AI policy, then you automatically say no to this one. But if you've got an AI policy, does it encourage people to use AI? Okay, and being very specific about the wording here, many AI policies talk about the restrictions around AI. So safety and security and data privacy and confidentiality. These are really important things, don't get me wrong. Very few of them have something like we encourage people to use AI to improve their productivity and enhance their customer experience. And I reckon that should be in a policy. It should be something that's written down and made very clear to people throughout the organization that you're encouraging them to use AI. Leads on to the next one. Our leaders and managers are also encouraged to encourage their teams to experiment with AI. I'm working with some really wonderful organizations at the moment who are even taking this to the next level. So they're doing things like I'm running like hackathon kind of programs for them, where so they work on some AI projects, and the organization is even giving some prizes to the best projects and best ideas that come out of it. And just amazing what some of the ideas are. I'm amazed myself to see the innovation and ingenuity of some of these teams when they're being encouraged to use it, and when their leaders and managers are the ones who are encouraging them to use it. Okay, the last question out of 10 is, do you have a plan? This came up earlier as well. We're talking about professional development. Do you have a plan to train your people on AI and what it means for them? And I'm using the word train loosely. It's professional development more broadly. It may be training, it may be mentoring, it may be coaching, it may be going to conferences, whatever it turns out to be. Do you have a plan for the ongoing professional development? Because if you get it right, it can work really well for you. And if you get it wrong, it can go wrong, like really badly wrong. Let me show you a couple of examples, one of which I alluded to earlier with Leach's comment actually. But let me show you one other that happened recently in Glasgow. This actually made news around the world, so you might have heard this story. There was an entertainment company in Scotland, in Glasgow, and they set up during school holidays this great Willy Wonka chocolate extravaganza for kids. And so kids and their parents turned up for this, and they had this AI generated artwork and this AI generated social media. And when they turned up, it was like this big empty warehouse with just almost nothing in there. But that wasn't the real problem. So that was a problem, and it made media because it was AI generated promotion that they'd used. But I reckon the real problem was some of their promotional material they just hadn't even bothered checking. So have a look at this. So by the way, if you're using any of these generative AI tools for creating images, if you ask it to put words in images, it gets it wrong. There's technical reasons for that, which I won't go into now. But just look at this, like some of the words there, they're not even real words. So what does this show? It just shows that the people who are using the AI, they weren't negligent, they were ignorant. They didn't realize that what AI generated had to be checked, which is coming back to your question, Lichia, earlier. Is it possible that it creates fake results or false results? Absolutely, and with things like this, absolutely. There was another example, a little bit more serious, towards the end of last year. In the wake of the PwC scandal, there's a Senate inquiry into the way that these big consulting firms deal with government, and they took submissions to that inquiry, and one came from 3 very senior academics in Australian universities, senior academics, who put this submission together, sent it off to the Senate inquiry, only to discover that because they'd used Google Bard, which is like the equivalent of ChatGPT, to generate some of the case studies for their report, it had completely made up stuff and told complete lies about this, about what these consulting firms were doing. They admitted that they were using, once they realized it, they were using AI to make false allegations of serious wrongdoings in submissions to a really important inquiry. And these are academics, their day job is to do research, write reports, and make sure that everything's fact-checked. But again, they didn't realize the consequences of using a tool like this, only because it's new, not because they were being negligent or in any way malicious. They just didn't understand the tool. Okay, so this is why it's so important to make sure that when you're bringing people on the AI journey, you don't just enable the tools for them, but you also have some education around that. I'm going to share with you something that you often hear financial planners talk about. I'm not a financial planner, I don't have a license, I've never played one on TV, so this is not financial advice in any way, but I'm sure you'd have heard something like this. Many people would have heard something like this in the past, probably from some sort of financial advisor. Low risk, low return, high risk, high return. Can I just ask, just for the fun of it, how many people have heard something like this in the past? Can you just type in yes or no? Have you heard something like this? Low risk, low return, high risk, high return. Okay, lots of yeses, not surprising. Okay, so my accountant who's here live today said he said it as well. Good. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm very grateful to somebody that I worked with many, many years ago when I was a web designer. He taught wealth education courses, Paul Council. And I remember having a chat with him once, and he was talking about this because I was building his website, but we used to have chats about wealth in general. And he said, this is rubbish. This is not the way you should be thinking about return and risk. So his philosophy was this. It's all about knowledge. So he said, high knowledge, high return, and high knowledge, low risk. It's not as sexy as the first version, but he's absolutely right. And I've taken that as a guiding principle for me whenever I'm looking at investing in property, in myself, in my business. It's if I have the knowledge, then it increases the potential for return and lowers my risk. Again, this is not financial advice, but I reckon it's a really good principle that all of us should be thinking about as well in our journey. So how do you get the knowledge? Bringing people on the journey is not just about enabling the tools, it's about giving them the knowledge. Okay, I'm going to stop now for my last set of questions before we stop for the last opportunity for questions. So let me answer some of the questions that have come in, and if you've got any others, add them to the chat as well. I've got a couple of little things to do before I finish up, a couple of other little tips. It's interesting that some TAFE lecturers are encouraging learners to use AI to improve the standard of working, and I think this is true. I think this is what it's the education sector broadly is. Some of them have been dragged kicking and screaming to it, but some of them are realizing that AI is a really powerful tool that they should be using to be able to enhance what they do. Because once they leave the formal education system, of course, they'll be expected to know how to use AI. Anne says it's possible that AI would slow things down in the short term because of the checking that has to be done. Yes and no, Anne. So what I find is that, so for example, I'll give you an example. So I do a lot of work with lots of different industries. I'm doing some work in the mining industry in a couple of weeks, and they wanted some examples of AI in the mining industry. And of course, there's some obvious ones like self-driving trucks and things like that. But I wanted examples from around the world. So I asked Perplexity for a list of 20 innovations in mining. And then one thing about Perplexity, which I wasn't going to mention but talk about, but I will because Anne's asked the question. When you use Perplexity to do that sort of research, it tells you its sources. So ChatGPT doesn't, but Perplexity will. So then I can click on and then review the sources. That process takes me much less time than if I had to. What I used to do was go and Google, do some other research, and then still check the sources that way because I've been Googling them. So the AI does a lot of the heavy lifting for me at the start, and I know that I need to then do the fact checking. So if you're using it correctly, it will save you time, not cost you time. Okay, and there's some skills, there's some so things to know to use it correctly. And what I do with a lot of clients is just show them how to craft questions or prompts to ChatGPT and other tools so you get better results. Elena, we have 5 generations in the workforce at the moment. How do we educate our staff in the use of AI so everyone can keep up? So this is quite a big question, Elena, so I won't answer it in full here. But with these 5 generations, or you've got people with diverse experience and expertise, it's very much about making sure that everyone feels comfortable on this journey. It's like it's a technology that seems to be thrust upon us. in the last 18 months or 2 years, and unfairly, because most people haven't had the opportunity to have a big runway to learn this and decide where they're going to, how they're going to deal with it. So he used to say, I can't say it here, so AI is more disruptive than COVID. And people would go, oh, that's terrible. COVID was the worst thing that ever happened. For many people, it was. AI is more disruptive because it's going to last longer and it's going to have a big impact on us for longer. But it is. And disruption absolutely causes crises, but it also creates opportunities. And there are going to be opportunities for everyone, and the opportunities are going to be different for people in the team. So there's no simple answer to this, Elena, except to say, if you're bringing your team along on the journey, it's not the team as a whole, it's individuals in the team, and each of them will have their own journey. I've got some other material around like how different people deal with change, and it's working with change. So different people will look at change differently. Okay, Russell, given Gen AI has been taught on significant amounts of copyrighted material, how do you see educational institutions on the use of copyrighted accounting for Gen AI? Yeah, so again, Russell, this is quite a big question. It's around copyright and the fact that there's a lot of controversy now around generative AI being trained on data that's copyright, and there are lawsuits around it at the moment. It's beyond the scope of today to discuss that. And what's happening with the big Gen AI companies is they're saying that any lawsuits will cover. So you won't be held liable. Again, I'm not a lawyer either, but that seems to be the general approach to it. But if you're concerned about that in your organization, don't use AI to use copyrighted material. So I use AI to take transcripts of my videos and to create transcripts of my videos and create blog posts from them, create articles from them. It's my original material. So there are ways around that by simply, if that's a real concern, there are plenty of ways to use AI without it infringing on copyright. Okay, let me do the last bit. I did promise to share this bit with you, talking about Copilot. I think Keith, when you were asking about this earlier, so Microsoft released some recent research, which they call the 11 by 11, based on how people are using Copilot. Because of course, Microsoft's not spying on all the content that people are using, but they can see how people are using their AI tool. So they came up with this very little, easy to remember little slogan, 11 by 11. They said, if you can get people using AI for 11 minutes a day for 11 weeks, that's enough time for them to embed that as a habit and learn enough that then they will use it forevermore. Because you need a little bit of time. There's a little bit of a learning curve to start using it and not get frustrated by it. But it doesn't need a huge amount of time. So they said 11 minutes a day for over 11 weeks, that's enough time for them to realize the value of it and to be able to use it effectively. And then they'll start using it automatically because it's saving them time, it's making them money, helping them improve the client experience. Okay, so you don't have to use 11 by 11, but it's not a bad rule of thumb to start with when you're thinking about bringing people on that AI journey. Okay, I'm going to do one last quick check to see if there's questions. I don't see any coming in. Let's jump ahead to there. So for me, if you want to engage me and work with me on using AI, I can recommend two things. So you can find both of these at gihan.ai. So I've got the domain name gihan.ai. Takes you to a page on our website. One of them is the AI at Work workshop, which is very much roll up your sleeves. Let's talk about how we can actually do things with ChatGPT. So I'm doing that for local councils. I showed you that Golf Management Australia, for schools, for other educational institutions, for real estate groups. So let's actually do the practical side of it. And the other one is at a leadership level. So what are you doing for your leaders to understand what AI means and what it can do for you? I find that many leaders want to come along to the first workshop as well, the AI at Work, because they're thinking about it as leaders, but they've never actually used the tools themselves. But this one looks at things like your policy, things like actually making it happen in your workplace. So if you're interested in either of them, go to gihan.ai and you'll get access to, you'll find out about both of them. Please if you haven't already downloaded the handout, the workbook that I gave you earlier, please do that. If you've enjoyed this, well, one thing is you can, as people are already doing, give me some emojis, but also please feel free to leave me a testimonial on LinkedIn. That's what I use mostly. That's my main social media platform. Or write something that you really liked about this presentation and tag me on LinkedIn. I'd really appreciate that. So thank you, everyone. My last message, as I usually leave people with, is don't wait. Just don't wait. Don't wait for all your ducks to line up in a row. Don't wait for things to be perfect. Start before you're ready, because the world won't wait for you. Thanks, everyone. All the best on your AI journey. I'll see you in the future.